Alright, welcome back to part 2. You can see we got a lot more stuff on this table. This is where things get a bit more interesting. I've got the top of this frame off. And one thing I wanted to mention in part 1 of the frame build is in this kit, this Hobbypower kit, it came with a lot of these double-sided foam stickies here. There's even more here, and I've got more down there that it came with. It came with a ton. Zip ties, you know, those are the basic things that you need. What I want to mention here is the power distribution board. Ideally, you would want to have nylon standoffs to raise this off of your frame. You don't want any electrical components coming in contact directly, you know, circuit boards with the carbon fiber frame. Carbon fiber is conductive, so keep in mind when soldering, make sure you have nice clean solders so when you go to put this down there, nothing touches your frame. And one more thing too, if you do want to do standoffs in the process of building your frame, before you install the bottom piece here, you would want to go ahead and put your nylon standoffs through, put your nuts on it, so that way, you know, because with it like this, you would be using these two holes and these two holes. So basically these four here on this frame, and there's not really any room to get a nut through there. I mean, you can probably put it, you know, fish it in there like that, which is possible, but just keep in mind when you're putting your frame together, kind of have it planned out ahead of time. And normally you do, so or would, but in our case, we're going to be using two. I'm going to be using two of these. We're going to stick them to our power distribution board, and we're going to stick it down onto the frame like that, which gives us plenty of height to make sure our components don't touch anything here. Things we're going to need is we're going to need soldering iron. I'm using a butane one, but you can use electric. It doesn't matter as long as it's a soldering iron. It'll get the job done. We're going to install our motors. This kit came with Sunny Sky brushless motors, and these things are tiny, super tiny. These are, I could barely even say it, X1806S 14. The kV is 2300. This is a clockwise motor. We have clockwise and counterclockwise, so I'm going to be explaining that as well. Alright, let's get started with the power distribution board. Before we go soldering anything to it, let's go ahead and put it in our frame, and it's gonna be pretty much in this orientation here, because I want the main power lead to come off of this side. You know, also try to add some foresight before you start building things together, and it'll take a while. These are our ESCs that we're going to be using. These are BL Heli. I hope I'm saying that right. ESCs. That's the firmware they have inside of them. I've never used the BL Heli ESCs before, and one thing I noticed is it doesn't have a UBEC, and it doesn't have anything that'll supply power to our CC3D flight controller. So I actually had to go back on Amazon and order a UBEC that will be able to take the battery voltage, drop it down, so that way we can power our CC3D with that. So let's go ahead and lay everything out. Our 3 wires go towards the motor. Our red and black wire go towards the power distribution board. And I just want to make sure that we have enough wire to be able to solder to our power distribution board. So I'm just laying everything out. And it looks like we have a winner. So we can make our solder points here and our solder points there, and that should work out just fine. Alright, we got our soldering iron all nice and toasty. Let's give it a little test. Beautiful. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm not going to solder my ESCs directly to the power distribution board. I'm going to solder bullet connectors directly. I'm going to solder female bullet connectors to the power distribution board like that. So that way on this particular frame build it gives me the ability to plug and unplug ESCs without having to worry about desoldering anything. So we're going to go ahead and pre-tin power distribution board. Like that. Not too much, but not too little either. A little too much on that one. Crap. The downside of running using butane torches, running out. So I'm trying to solder with my left hand. I'm right-handed. Let's change that. You can see the solder smoke. Definitely don't breathe that in. Ideally you'd want to have a fan, but there's enough noise going on with the window unit. Beautiful, just like that. Now we have a way to solder our bullet connectors on. This is the end where the wire would normally go through. This is the female end. That's where the male end connects.
Got him! Got him!
Just in case you need an explanation on that. This is gonna be a little awkward. So something like that, I can have the bullet connector sitting on the pad. Gonna look something like that. I wonder if I can take my Allen key. Would it be easier to stick the Allen key through it like that? Make sure the whole pad gets nice and hot, so that way your bullet connector can seat properly. Let's go ahead and straighten this one up while we're at it. The Allen key seems to be working great. other one. There you go. A little close-up of what I'm trying to do here. And that's not going to go anywhere. That's great. I like that. And also what it is, you know, some people would like to put wires through the holes and they'll solder through the bottom or whatever. This also makes sure that it's flat as possible too, so that's cool. And that one's a little crooked, so I can go back and fix that. That's no big deal. Basically what I'm doing is I'm just holding the bullet connector over the dab of solder, and I'm heating the bullet connector and the solder pad at the same time, and I can feel the bullet connector just sink down where it seats all the way down to the PCB. Lets me know that I'm all the way there. There we have it, guys. We have successfully soldered our bullet connectors to the power distribution board. Man, that looks great. I like it. They're not 100% straight, but that should work. Good deal. Alright, the next step is we need a way to connect the battery to the power distribution board. What? Leave me alone. This kit, the Hobbypower kit, just gotta pour this out, comes with way more than you need, which is great. It comes with, I can't think of this connector right off the top of my head, but it comes with this one, and it also comes with the XT60 connector as well, which is just what we're going to be using. That's what all my quadcopters use. And see, this is what I was talking about. Tons and tons of double-sided sticky tape pads. So we're going to want to strip off both ends of the supplied wire. Let's move our pieces out the way. Now again, like I did with the bullet connectors, you're going to want to pre-tin the soldering pads. You can see there are holes. You can see where there's holes for the wire to go through. I don't want the wire to go through the hole. Again, the flatter I can keep this, the better. But it's up to you. If you want the wires to go through the hole, that's completely on you. You can see where the solder actually fills the hole up. It makes contact with the bottom pad as well. Just for some of those you, just in case y'all are concerned about, well, it's, you know, it's not all the way down. It's not, you know, making contact with the bottom pad. It's not going to be secure. And we're going to want to make sure that our strip back pieces are as short as possible. just like the pad, you're going to want to pre-tin the ends of your wires. And positive goes to positive. And our negative wire goes to our negative. And just like that, we have our power distribution board soldered. Again, I don't know why I keep cutting that off because I'm not quite done yet. Now we need to solder this connector on there, and it comes with heat shrink tubing. So we have our heat shrink tubing on our wires already, which I'm proud of myself. Normally I would forget something like that. And our connector is already labeled. It's positive, and the chamfered end is negative. So we'll do one lead at a time. There we go. Got him. I had to anchor down the wire with my needle nose pliers there because they kept wanting to slide out. There you go, something like that. That should work. And there you have it. You have a fully soldered power distribution board with bullet connectors. Alright, I got my helping hands out for this next step. This next step seems like it could be a little tedious. Now, on our ESCs, we're going to solder our male ends to our leads here. Put our bullet connector in there like so. It makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? What we're going to do before we stick the wire into the bullet connector, we're going to fill up the bullet connector, the part where the wire goes into, we're going to fill that up with solder. Let me get that nice and hot. And I don't know if you saw that bubble or not, but you want to make sure that there's not going to be a bubble in there. Okay. While this is super hot, we're just going to submerge our wire into the bullet connector and just let it cool. And be very careful not to touch that bullet connector for a little while. You don't want to burn yourself. Let me go with the next one. Just like before. Gonna want to fill up and pop. I'm going to take our negative end right into the center and let it cool. And you just soldered 2 male bullet connectors to your ESCs, which allow you to plug in directly to your power distribution board. Like that. I'm going to show you another way you can do it. Before I was doing it the way you would do it if you had a soldering iron, but Another way to achieve this is with, you know, like I'm using a butane torch. I've got mine cut down to number 2, a low setting. You can actually heat up the brass bullet connector directly with the torch and fill up the cavity that way. Just by heating it up with the torch end. We'll apply the flame to the brass bullet connector, insert solder, and that fire, that's actually the resin that's in the solder already. That's what flames up, so that's nothing to worry about by no means. And when using a butane torch, you use all the safety precautions you can possibly think of, obviously. I mean, of course you got to use, you know, proper safety precautions for soldering iron as well, but a butane torch is actual flame. And if you're using it indoors, make sure you're always using proper safety procedures. Make sure you've got a fire extinguisher around, you know, because everybody has one of these laying around, right? And for our last one, now there's such thing as getting it too hot. You don't want that. You don't need to be, you know, you definitely don't want it, you know, you don't want to use something like that. That would be extreme. You just want to heat it up. That's all the way down. I mean, you can even use it like that. That would do just fine. The setting I had it on was that right there. Alright, so now we can go ahead and finish up our power distribution board install. We already determined this is where we're going to have it. We're going to have it sit right about here. So let's go ahead and take our double-sided foam and let's stick it to, let's get that out of the way, stick it to the back of the power distribution board like that. Now that's probably high enough to clear whatever we need to, but if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. So this is the front. This is the front of our quad here, and we're going to put this down there, something like that. Good deal. Put on our ESCs, and yeah, let's move on to the next step. Alright, before we solder bolt connectors onto these, again, what we're going to do is the whole setup is going to be comprised of bolt connectors. We have bolt connectors on the power end of our ESCs, but I'm going to want bolt connectors on the motor end of the ESCs so that way we can take everything apart, change anything out whenever we want to. But let me explain to you clockwise and counterclockwise. This is the front. See, this is the front of the quadcopter. This is the back right here. We're going to want our clockwise motor over here, counterclockwise right there, counterclockwise here, and clockwise here. Reason being is because our propellers spin this way. Clockwise, spin this way, counterclockwise, counterclockwise, and clockwise. They spin inwards on each other. And that's the way it is for the multi-wheel that I have on my Hercules. That's the way it is on my Cheerson CX20. It's that way on my SEMA X5C. That's the way it is on everything. It's even on my 250 size class quadcopter, which is right here. This is my full built 250 size class quadcopter, and you can see when you spin it like that, it's going to want to tighten because it goes this way. The same controller, the CC3D that I use in this, that's what we're putting on this quadcopter. But it spins in this way. When you put your finger on the nut and spin the motor, it tightens, and it's like that for all four corners. Put your finger, tightens. That's you know, an easy way. Clockwise, counterclockwise, counterclockwise, clockwise on your rotation. That I already have built. Let's explain the wires right quick. Okay. When you're looking at the motor like this, and you have your three wires there in a row, look at it as 1, 2, 3, or A, B, C. On your ESCs, not all of your ESCs are going to be labeled. Some of them don't even say anything at all. And you can see right here where the wires come out flat. This ESC actually says ABC. That's great. Not all of them say that, but some of them will say ABC, some will say 1, 2, 3, and a good majority of them don't say anything at all. So if we looked at it like this, ABC, ABC, that's how we can know that our motor is going to spin in a certain direction already. Once we determine what direction it's spinning, in other words, we can do two motors wired up directly like this, and then we need to wire up the other two motors with one of these wires swapped, like ABC. We would swap, it would be BAC or AB or ACB, or you know, something like that. I'm confusing crap out of myself, but alright, now we're gonna solder male bullet connectors directly to our motors, and then we'll move on to the ESCs and solder female connectors to the ESCs. Alright, I'm not going to drag you along through all other 9 wires. We still have the other 3 motors to do, but that is bullet connectors on your motors. Now the R4 motors have the male bullet connectors soldered to them. Let's slide them out of the way and focus on the 12 female ends for our ESCs. Just show you right quick. This is the female bullet connector in that size, but they also make ones that are much smaller, and I do have a full set of small ones, but I opted to not use those in this build just to make this more standard. Now the smaller ones would have worked really good for the small wire, but I just couldn't be bothered. It'll be just fine. And just like all other steps, heat, wire, that's female ends for the motor side of the ESCs. Got the female bullet connectors. I'm going to do this just like I did for the motors. I'm going to do this for the rest of them, and I'll be back. How sad. I think I'm done with the soldering at this point. We've got our females all soldered on the motor ends of the ESCs. We've got our males soldered to the power end of the ESCs. We've got all of our males soldered to our motor. We have the females soldered to the power distribution board, so now everything can literally just connect together. And if I wanted to change anything out, it's a matter of just simply just disconnecting something and changing it out. Alright, now it's time to install the motors. We have them in the correct orientation they need to be in. Clockwise, counterclockwise, counterclockwise, clockwise. This is the front of the quadcopter, this is the back. Now we just need to bolt them down. Then we'll get to hooking up our ESCs to our motors and testing the direction, and I'm going to be using my servo tester here, so that way we can go ahead and get the motor spinning, get them wired up correctly, and move on. Okay. Make sure our wires are facing the right way. For these really tiny motors, you can see it's designed to fit multiple size motors, but it uses the smaller slots on this particular quadcopter frame. And I'm also using the tiny little screws that was supplied with these motors, so the clearance shouldn't be an issue. But we'll check that when we're done. Just like that. Our center point on our motor is nice and center with the arm. Moving right on along. And keep in mind, you want your wires to flow along the side. I guess you can have them out if you want to, just in case if you want to route them down and around. But normally I always just install my motors in line with the arm. Damn, I screwed up. And there, 4 motors are installed. We got the wires facing the right way. Awesome. Alright guys, now that we have our motors installed and they're in the right orientation, clockwise and counterclockwise, and we know our motors are going to spin the right way for the propeller, because if you swap the motors, if the motors were backwards, let's say the counterclockwise was over here, say the clockwise was over here and counterclockwise was over here, when you go to fly your quadcopter, it would actually spin the nut off and cause your quadcopter to flip. So that's why it's important to have clockwise and counterclockwise in the right orientation. Now, like I mentioned earlier, not unless I edited it out for whatever reason, the BL Heli ESCs don't have a U-back inside of them. What is that? Now, we've got our ground wire and our signal wire. What we're missing is the third wire. Third wire is the power wire. What happens is, this is a Simon K Flash ESC. What this is, it's got a U-back inside of it. Now this is a much bigger one. I actually had to steal this from another quadcopter build that I haven't built yet, to test the motors and to pretty much get this thing to work, because my U-back's not supposed to be here until about a week from now. But all that jib jab aside, this servo connector has a 5-volt power supply to it, which allows other things to work, like an FPV, for instance, like an alarm, and most importantly, the flight controller. The flight controller needs power, and it gets its power from the ESC normally. So what I did was, I took one of my ESCs that I wasn't using, I soldered the XT60 connector to it, which I bought a bag of these from Amazon. I connected bullet connectors to one end of it, so that way I make it compatible to connect to my ESC here to get power from the battery. But if I wanted to, I can also use this to test, which I put heat shrink on the end of the motor end, so that way they don't arc or spark or touch something and blow up and catch a fire. But basically I'm using this to power my servo tester. So I'm using this, the U-back in here, I'm using the 5-volt signal in here power this, which this is going to act like a flight controller, but we can manually control our ESCs to make sure that we get them wired up correctly. Okay, so now I'm going to connect the ESC that we're going to use for our quadcopter. I'm going to connect that to the battery power supply. Okay, so now when we connect our battery, this is going to receive the battery voltage directly to this. I've already mentioned these motors have A, B, and C already. That's the order that it's going to fire. A, B, C. If I lay these wires flat, just like I showed you earlier, A, B, and C, let's connect it like that. If it worked out like I said, this motor should spin this way, which would be the wrong way. We want this motor to spin this way, but just to show you, A, B, and C, if we connect it to A, B, and C on the motor, it's going to spin clockwise. So that's A, B, oops, and C. And I'm pretty sure you can see it, but I went and put heat shrink over all of the brass, so that way I don't have to worry about any of these connectors come in contact. I did that for all of the motors. I did that for all of the ESCs on all the ends, so I don't have to worry about touching anything. So we've got our ESC connected to the motor. We've got our signal wire connected here. That's how we're going to be able to control it. We've got the 5-volt supply coming out of this into this. That's going to give us our power. Now all we have to do is connect the motor, connect the battery. That beep you heard actually does not come from the ESC at all. The ESC doesn't have any speaker on it. It doesn't make any noise. That noise you heard actually comes from the windings in the actual motor. So let's test it out. Cranking it up. Yeah, that motor is actually spinning this way. Let me find something to stick to it. This might kill me. No, that ain't gonna work.
Got it!
Maybe we might be able to see. Oh, I gotta flip it around, don't I? It's like the worst sticking, Oop. Why don't you just get some tape? Well, I ain't got no freaking tape. Yeah, you should have been able to see it go this way. So, that's no good. We need it to go this way. And we have it connected A, B, and C. Yeah, let's disconnect our battery. And just to make it simple, let's swap B and C. So now B on the ESC is going to the C of the motor. So we just swapped two of them. So all we did. And when the motor's actually making that noise, you can see the motor move just a little bit. So now this motor should be spinning this way. Yes. We were wondering, now we have this motor spinning the right way around. You saw it that time. This one's going to be A. B. And C. Connect our battery. So this one should be spinning this way already. Yes. Alright, I found a piece of black duct tape. Oops. And just start laying this thing out. So, let's go A. C. B. So that's one ESC connected. And there. Now the scary part is to do the wire management. You gotta try to get it looking as good as you can possibly get it. Okay, while I wasn't recording there, I wanted to kind of figure out how I wanted to route the wire. So I'm kind of doing like a, I'm doing a tuck under, over under type thing. I'm tucking the bullet connectors underneath right here and laying the ESC flat up here. I'm sure there's a much better way of doing it, but which would be shortening your wires. Ideally, you'd want to shorten your motor wires and your ESC wires to the shortest one possible. But since I didn't want to modify anything here, because the configuration of this particular 250 quad is going to change, and I already have really cool ideas on what I want to do with it. But for right now, we're just going to leave everything as long as possible. Alright, so now we've got all of our ESCs zip tied. I've got all the wires folding inwards on the inside of the quadcopter. I don't have them coming out. It's not really a thing, it's just something I've always done. Wires that come off the ESCs, I'm going to give them a twist. Not enough to hurt anything, but enough to bundle up the wire, something like that. We have everything hooked up. Right now we have this baby ready. She is ready for the CC3D flight controller. That's pretty much what needs to be worked on next. Well, alright guys, just as a little overview, you know, an end cap on part 2 here. This one was just a little bit more involved. We installed the motors. I told you, or I taught you how to identify the directions, clockwise, counterclockwise. I told you why that was important. I showed you my little tool I made to show you the direction of the motor, to make sure that the direction for the motor was correct. We learned about the old Hellies and how they don't have a UBEC inside of them, which kind of sucks, you know, so you got to supply your own 5 volts to be able to power your flight controller. We soldered bullet connectors directly to the power distribution board. We soldered bullet connectors to pretty much everything that we could, so that way everything here can be disconnected and reconfigured, so that way the power distribution board can stay right where it's at. It doesn't have to go anywhere, but the ESCs, the motors, and anything else we connect to it can change rapidly throughout. So yeah, guys, if you like this video, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe. If you dislike this video, dislike it. And part 3 should be coming up soon.